Afternoon all. I thought I might go over my game played on Thursday, and over the board game I had to travel to London, into the centre of London, to the Metropolitan Chess Club, which is actually one of the oldest chess clubs in London, founded, believe it or not, in 1890 with the amalgamation of two clubs called the Three Pawns and the Monument. So my opponent was Noel Stewart. He's about 140, so I was expected to beat him because I'm rated like 179. I was playing with the black pieces. He kicked off with d4. And I thought it might be fun to play the Albin counter gambit. So I played d5, and after c4, the Albin counter gambit e5. So let's see what happened here. He took d4. Now knight f3, not the trap e3. That's a trap line for bishop b4 check, and this is very annoying for white. D takes e here, and if bishop takes, then we've got e takes, and black's doing very well. We're going to win the queen, or we're doing this, promoting a knight here with check. So this is a well-known trap, disaster for white. Best would be in this position f takes e, check, queen e4, so leaving that bishop, just attacking that rook, and here we're also attacking e3, so because that's pinned that bishop. So this position would be very pleasant for black. No, he avoids the trap line, but I thought I'd mention it. So not e3, plays knight f3, and I play knight c6, which I think is the main move, not c5. There's actually knight c6 678 games, c5 1 game. I was tempted a little bit to play c5. I have played that as a surprise weapon, but it does weaken a lot of the light squares. g3 is the best move, I think. And now I do play a bit oddly here. I played f6, which is a very, very rare move actually. The most common is actually to play knight ge7. So bishop g2, knight g6. This is very, very common to do this, to try and grab that e pawn without touching the f pawn. So this position, so we've got 38 games here from this, and okay, the d pawn is a bit loose here, but now indeed c5. I know it weakens these light squares, and this diagonal looks really good. White's meant to have a small advantage here. It does look quite advantageous to white. And technically, actually, bishop takes c6 might be a good move in the circumstances. So this kind of stuff, it's slightly advantageous to white. But knight ge7 seems to be the most popular move in this position, followed by bishop e6. That looks to have the exotic idea of queen d7 behind it. So say bishop g2, queen d7. I was a bit wary though about this. Say castle queenside. I think you know, white's got some dangerous pressure on the queenside in this position. But okay, I play this f6 move. So f6 as a gambit. He took, knight takes. So white is better. Bishop e7. Perhaps best is actually bishop f5, just with the idea of maybe trying to play queen d7 and castle queenside again. This position is annoying though. If castling queenside here, can you see what brilliant move white has here, and which didn't really attract me to castling queenside much, this kind of possibility. If I gave you 10 seconds here, what would you play with white? Okay, knight e5 is pretty nasty with b7. So if I took, you know, queen takes, b7 is mate. Otherwise there's structural damage. So queen e6, knight takes, but queen a4, this is pretty nasty stuff. Okay, I can defend c6 for a moment, but white's actually a lot better here in this sort of position. Okay, so we'll go back to the game. I played bishop e7, just with the idea of trying to castle kingside, both sides castle. And no, it's not really a great opening, I have to say, at this point. a5, because I want to stop b4 and bishop b2, really undermining d4, because there's also b5 on the cards. So a5 seems important to play here. Now he actually plays queen d3, which looks like quite a logical move actually, just to play rook d1 and then try and round up the pawn simply on d4. Here's an opportunity though. There is an opportunity afforded with queen d3, which is to try and use this tempo gaining square, and I missed this possibility. The engine is suggesting knight g4, and it's not entirely bad for black. If bishop f4, then maybe even the outrageous g5 is possible. And here, I don't know, maybe this is okay for black. Is knight e5 probably not knight e5 though. White's always got a nice time on the light squares here, so something else. Perhaps bishop f5, chase the queen back, and then h6. This is okay. The knight can come back to e5, and it might be okay. But no, I play an inferior move. I play bishop g4. I don't think it's that hot, this move. Rook d1, getting on with the plan of just putting pressure on d4. And here I do slip up a little bit more. I think technically the engine's indicating there might be a really interesting move here in queen c8. Now, is that a kind of poison pawn, the one on d4? If knight takes, then possibly knight takes, queen takes, and then rook d8 skewers the queen and king, queen and rook rather. Queen can't defend the rook, but there's bishop d5 check. And here, to make sure queen e3 is not hitting a loose bishop, king f8. And actually, black in this position is looking okay because of this c6 coming up. But even like losing this piece, the engine doesn't think it's that big deal. It's just a small advantage for black apparently, this position, because white's got a lot of compensation here. But okay, you know, a piece is a piece generally. So here, you know, it should be better for black if black's not going to get swamped by these pawns. I mean, this looks fine. So it's a very fascinating possibility. This idea of playing queen c8. If the d pawn isn't taken, then what is white actually doing? If h3, let's give an example then, bishop f5. And that should be okay. I think taking on h3 is also okay, of course. There shouldn't be any problem just taking on h3. That's a bit of a silly move actually. Maybe c5, because if takes then there's check. But here again, bishop f5. So this queen c8 does seem pretty nifty and probably really quite required in this position. But no, I play actually, I didn't really see that stuff. Bishop c5. And white is just doing really well with knight bd2. He's just going to round up the pawn, pretty straightforward for my lower rated opponent. He's just going to round up the pawn, but he has done. I've checked his rating record. Actually, he has had some good results. So it seems that he was playing pretty solidly at the moment. And knight b3 is happening. White's got an advantage here. It needs very, very careful play. There might be a very interesting move actually, which has just cropped up at depth 20 for Houdini 4, bishop h5. Because this is quite a vicious idea, knight b3. If knight b3 here, bishop g6, queen moves back. Now where does it go without losing another tempo to knight e4? And that protects the bishop. And here, I mean, this sort of position is the d pawn can be taken tactically, it seems. here, if we arrive at this position, e3, knight c2, rook take. This is a long forcing sequence. This apparently is an equal position from an engine point of view. Wow. So giving up the queen and stuff like that. It's a crazy line, but it starts from bishop h5 to play bishop g6. This is hairy stuff. But I managed to. I just consider this as the major threat. You know, knight b3. I played the more straightforward a4, which doesn't really help the situation. b4 is strong here, but one symptom of b4 could potentially, in the long run, be the isolation of pawns. I don't want to move the bishop back because, you know, just c5 or bishop b2, and that d pawn is really in trouble. Especially after c5, shutting out this bishop, then white will be just free to take that. So I had to really take. So I'm a bit in trouble here after knight takes b3. This isn't really the great position I had in mind playing this Alvin counter game. I've misplayed it at this point. If the bishop goes back, you know, bishop b2, it just seems to be easy moves for white against d4. I played knight d7. Which actually, you know, white is such a comfortable position here. The end of the suggestion is actually to hit the queen and then play bishop f4, and you know, d pawn is just loose. Things are loose. It's not very pleasant at all. But he played actually knight f takes d4, which is good as well. I took. So yep, I'm 2 pawns down, and not only that, I kind of hallucinated rook takes f2 here as somehow being a good tactic earlier, but it just loses a rook. Actually, I didn't play this, but you know, there's no bishop d4. He's got 2 pieces on d4. So this position, I had to just be content with being 2 pawns down. After queen f6. I know this is not the most amazing game I've played this season, to be honest. 2 pawns down. The gambit has kind of become a more severe gambit, 2 pawns down. And he just plays bishop e3. Okay, I kick the queen. And possibly best is just to play queen b3 or queen c3 even. But this next move looks as though, you know, queen d5 is threatened, but I thought I can get away with c6, at least solving the d5 square. I'll play that, and I think so. This queen is not entirely brilliant there, and you know, if f4, he's not really winning anything here. I think I can just take on c4. And if he tries, you know, to attack, I can just take on e3 after. So f4 is out of the question, but he plays in this position knight f3, and actually this loses a little bit of the advantage here, believe it or not. Let's have a look. The engine suggestion is actually to play knight takes c6 or king h1. King h1 is interesting, and here in this position, knight takes c6, believe it or not. So if knight takes c6, queen takes g4, that's one idea. If b takes c6, bishop takes c5, and if bishop takes e3, knight takes e5, because then g4 is again attacked. So if rook takes, we've got queen takes g4. And this position is nice for white. So, but anyway, he didn't play king h1 or knight takes c6. There's interesting, these possibilities. He actually played knight f3, and basically this kind of gives back a pawn. I played bishop takes e3, and note that if here he had played queen takes e5, I've got bishop takes f2 check, And actually this is pretty bad. If king f1 here, bad for white. Queen takes e5 apparently. Bishop takes g3 check. Bishop takes h2. And black is not just pawn up, but there's some nice ideas like g5 even as threats, bishop e6, and then yeah, it's just a nice position. And so this is to be avoided. If king h1 here, even worse, bishop takes f3, and then here queen takes, because the queen's attacked, bishop takes g2, and I've just snapped up a piece. So this tactic really means that I might be getting a pawn back after bishop takes e3, but you know, if knight takes e5, but he plays actually f takes e3. I think slightly better than f takes e3 is queen takes e3, just losing pawn back though, still a little bit like the game, but under better circumstances. Here white's slightly better, so yeah, it's not great, but he played f takes e3, and this doesn't keep the pawn structure as intact as queen takes. So now actually I do decide to go into an endgame, a pawn down, because he's got lots of isolated pawns. It's only a pawn down after the knight takes check, knight takes f3 check, bishop takes. I just take on f3, and here actually the engine is indicating it's not so bad for black. He plays check, and I didn't really want this continue. I thought this was something wrong with this. Rook f1 queen e2 for this continuation here is almost kind of, it's very dangerous for my king. I thought this kind of thing. So actually I just retreated the queen to f7 here, and I'm looking forward to my you know, this rook attacking e3 and this one for rook a4. I'm looking forward to attacking these isolated pawns. He did take, and I think it was around about here, off of the draw, and I rejected it actually because I thought I had enough compensation here. From an engine point of view, it's only 0.15 in white's favour, so it's a pawn down endgame, but with white having isolated pawns, after rook e7 it's actually tricky to hold on to the pawns, and I think white has to try and play actively in this position, giving up e3 here. The engine is indicating rook ad1 and also a3, but if a3 rook d8, and that's the end of the game, that's just like poisoned pawn, because the king needs to be factored in. That's mating in 2. So but in this position, if rook takes e3, rook d7, actually white should have an advantage in theory. The threat is to bring both rooks to the 7th rank. Rook e4, here rook g4. Apparently this is about equal actually, even though both rooks are on the 7th. The engine indicating this is about equal, nearly. Maybe it's difficult to believe, but it's about equal. But that's the way to do it, and maybe that's a very important rook and pawning lesson already, right here. That what would you do with white in this position? I mean, the rooks need to be coordinating, ideally on the 7th rank here. So giving up the e3 pawn might be a very important thing to do with rook ad1. He played rook f3, and now black is actually technically, believe it or not, from an engine point of view, better here already after rook f3. Just rook a4 here, and you can see that you know, these isolated pawns. Look at this passive rook. This is passive rook. These are aggressive rooks. This is quite amazing, but you know, if c5, you know, rook c4, and this rook's conveniently, you know, protecting b7, so I'm getting my pawn back here, and white's still got more isolated pawns than I have. But this didn't happen here. My opponent played rook d1, and again, you know, if this horrible rook d8 is threatened, and I had to consider h6 or g6. I ruled out here h6 because I thought actually after check, I thought h4 h5 was a problem. Let's have a quick look. The engine doesn't seem to think this is a problem. I thought this is like a mating net. I guess in this position there's time just about. I didn't really see this, but rook e5 here saves the day. So that if here I can just take on h5, and there's no g4 here, so this seems to be safe enough. Rook f4, rook c2, rook f2. Well, it seems as though if I can win h5, I'm creating an escape square for my king. But no, I actually chose g6 in this position. g6, just to give the king g7. I also thought, you know, the king could come to h6. Black is slightly better now. White is forcibly losing a pawn, it seems. He plays rook d4, and I just take on a3. Equal on pawns now, but his pawns are more isolated than mine still. I'm hitting e3. And he's actually getting in quite bad time pressure as well. There's an extra 15-minute bonus coming up at move 30. But after here, I was very, very pleased with my position. So here, at move 30, rook e2, final move. And he had about 2 minutes going to 17 now at move 31. And I had quite a lot of time on my clock. I think for 30 minutes I was going to 45 minutes, so 45 minutes for me, 17 for my opponent. So I think it's tricky. Rook d3, and I play rook c2 now. I'm shaking off, believe it or not. Well, I thought I was shaking off another pawn. If rook f4 here, which wasn't played, I think this should have been played actually. So yeah, I'm not sure it's that easy to win another pawn. Yeah, it's not. This should have been played, this sort of thing. But no, my opponent kind of plays rook d4, plays c5, and here rook g4 was played, as though there's an interest in rook g5. I play rook e2, rook g5, b6, rook d5 now. I'm a pawn up now after taking. He throws in a check. King g7 now takes. So pawn up, rook d6. And from an engine point of view, it's just less than half a pawn actually. I thought I was doing okay here now, but it's actually less than half a pawn to black. But I'm pretty sure this is a growable advantage. Well, this was now a blunder, h4, just losing another pawn. If king f2, yeah, I think there's a lot of work here needed. Because the c pawn might be holding these two pawns. So there's work that's needed here, say h5. Yeah, I think I was very fortunate that I was helped by my opponent's time pressure and blunder here. This would be a lot of work still. My opponent helped things with h4 for me, just losing g3 here. I take on g3 and it's just basically all over now. It's quite easy to just play for a pass pawn over there and bring the king to the queenside pawn, which is what I did. Eventually bringing the king to this queenside pawn, and it's all over really. But yeah, I was for a while there. I was clearly worse objectively. I think and this is now becoming a sort of pattern on these away matches. I mean, actually, I think I'm affected by going on the long journey via the underground. I think I'm a bit knackered for the middle game, and it seems in the end game I can go to an end game a pawn down and somehow recover if needed. But definitely, there was to play this. There was a critical moment here that it seems pretty bad for black. Pretty bad indeed for black. Even like earlier, the idea of well, I had to play Queen C in this position after Rook D1 instead of Bishop C5, which seems fair enough, but you know, Bishop C5 is a loose piece and a target to a double attack on C5 and D4. So it's not really that brilliant, Bishop C5. So Queen C8 would have been moved to give more of a fight for the middle game. So I felt very fortunate with this game, and I'm not sure. I hope there was something instructive anyway in the rook and pawn ending. If we just review a critical rook and pawn ending again, I think White had to make sure his rooks weren't passive. So the idea of giving up the E3 pawn here with rook AD1, White would have kept an advantage going. So it's very, very interesting how, you know, endings with isolated pawns and stuff. You might just think though, hold on a sec, was this really, you know, what if H6? I'm still attacking A3, then rook D3, if rook A4, rook C3, you know, White's maintaining his extra pawn, and you know, this should be okay. This sort of position. H3. If ever rook E4, then maybe C5. So yeah, I think White deteriorated in the rook and pawn ending, giving me back a pawn here, and then starting to lose his pawns. Didn't help. But even here, if H4 wasn't played, this would be tricky, because this pawn is kind of holding these two. So it was a bit of a fortunate win, to be honest. But I think the underground, going on long underground journeys, it doesn't really inspire me when I get to play on the away matches for this particular league. It's I don't know. Okay, it just takes a little bit out of me when I get to these places. But my opponent played, you know, exactly the right plan against the D pawn for a long time, it seems. So great credit to him for that. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.